Before we begin, thank you very much to Sky the Guy 2.0 for joining the Patreon campaign. Thank you so much for helping out and keeping the channel alive. Always appreciate everyone who helps and pitches in and lets me continue to do this nonsense. With this shout out, I have officially cleared 365 consecutive shout outs in a row. That is absolute insanity. That is a level of support I never thought I would ever get. Thank you so much for getting this streak to a solid year of shout-outs. Absolutely incredible. Thank you. We will be addressing the future of the shout-out streak as well as a few other things for the channel relatively soon, because there are some things we have to discuss. But first, we have to get through the Q&A video tomorrow, which is going to be 2 hours out of my night tonight to film. We need to get through today's video. And I'll be honest, I've been struggling to wake up all day. So it's been a little bit rough. So we needed something easy today. And I've noticed, since the Haslab has dropped for Omega Prime, I have seen an unusual level of discourse surrounding it, its price, if it's worth it, if it's worth doing a new set of those characters. A lot of chaos. More discourse than usual, and I think part of that is the fact that it's not a G1 Haslab. But nevertheless, even though I normally don't hit the same topic 2 days in a row, I feel like the noise is just a little bit too loud to ignore. So today we're going to be talking about it again. However, we're going to center in on the price and whether or not this toy needed to be made and if it is worth the cost and if there was another way they could have released it. Things that we kind of glossed over yesterday that now we're going to hone in on and hopefully not take 40 minutes to discuss. The first is, I did see someone made a comment on my video going like, well, yeah, the Haslab no one asked for. It's already more than halfway there. Whoa, living on a prayer. So obviously people did ask for it. Obviously people did want it. It's clearly going to succeed like the other Transformer Haslabs have succeeded. Not a big surprise, but no, it's doing what it was expected to do. And I would argue it's doing more than it expected to do. Now, the issue here is, yes, it is a $250 set. Now, like I said, I've noticed an unusual amount of discourse over the price of this toy, and a lot of people are just unhappy with the look of the product and what it does for the price. And yeah, just a lot of people who just really want to come in and voice that. So let's address that first. Okay, so what is it going to take to convince you that this actually is worth the price? Nothing. I'm just going to cut to the chase on this one. If you don't like it for this price, don't buy it. It's simple as that. And here's the thing. If you have legitimate grievances with it, that's fine. I know some people who do not like the way that they handle Haslab stuff. That's perfectly valid. If you're not comfortable paying for a toy that you will not get for a year, don't pre-order it. I'm sorry, it's a made-to-order toy. This is how made-to-order products have worked for decades. You know, this is nothing new in the industry. If you're not comfortable participating in it, that's perfectly fine. Sit out. You know, if you don't think it's worth that price, sit out. That's the thing. Pricing is subjective. It is worth what you think it is worth. And if you think it is worth $250, great. If you do not, great. That said, while you can have legitimate grievances, and I don't mind the discourse that, you know, creates genuine discussion about whether or not it's worth it or not, there have been an unusually large amount of people who just come in to rain on people's parade and just be very insultive about it. You know, just basically throwing around baseless accusations, Hasbro greed, you know, they could have done this as Commander. You know, and some of that is legitimate, some of it's not. Some of it is just people coming in to be jerks and rain on people who are actually enjoying this and excited for it. Don't be that person. Like, if all you want to do is just be really negative and really just like down on people who are happy about it, don't come in and be loud. You know, if you don't like what they're doing with it, fine. Give me a constructive argument about it. Don't just be mean. Don't just be a jerk about it. Don't start ruining other people's good time about it. I'm not going to do anything in this video that's going to convince you otherwise. So, vote with your wallet, don't buy it, and just leave it at that. But let's do the actual analysis here, right? So, for starters, yeah, we have the sizes of the toys, so we actually know like kind of what we're getting into here. So, right off the bat, we do know the Blue Bolts is deluxe size. He's a weaponizer. That gives us the only real pricing scale that we can attach to this as far as like how a normal toy goes. So if we call him a $25 deluxe, then that leaves about $112 each for Optimus Prime and Ultra Magnus. That is higher than the $90 that Commanders go for, and we do know that they are larger and denser than most Commander class toys tend to be. So already that is kind of elevating their worth. Now there are some exceptions to this, and we're going to cover them here in a bit. For starters, we do have direct word from Hasbro. This is from directly from the Transformer team, that if they did these as Commander class toys, they would have to be smaller. They would have to wait a year in between them. Blue Bolts would have been a separate deluxe release, and they could not have offered the extra items that were going to be coming in with this. Keep in mind, when I boiled Ultra Magnus and Optimus down to $112 each, I'm not including the 2 display stands, and I'm not including the Matrix Saber. Those are completely separate components that you can attach value to, but that's only if you hit the stretch goals. So I'm basing this on the extreme, that at the most, they will be $112 in value. If we do account for the rest of that, they might be lower. They might actually go lower than that if you account for the price of the base and the sword. Not too much lower, not Commander class lower, but definitely a little bit more value there if we get all the reward tiers. Let's take a look at size. If we're going to compare these to Commanders, the only Commander that comes close to their size is Jetfire, who ranks in about as tall as Ultra Magnus at 11.5 inches at the head. So you have some basis for comparison there. However, we do acknowledge that Jetfire is doing a very simple thing. He's just a really big jet transformer, and the engineering is not terribly complex for that size. He's just a really, really big jet. And no, he's a good toy, but he is definitely a Commander that gets by on size alone. Commander class Transformers tend to be dense in what they can do, right? So the one that I come back to is Motormaster. Motormaster is a $90 toy that everyone seemed really happy with, He was a very fun toy. He feels very solid. He's very bulky, and he has a lot that has to be done. That said, with everything that he has to accomplish, that is more comparable to Fire Convoy, I feel, because he has the individual cab that has to transform into a sizable Voyager-ish robot size. He has the trailer that has to have a super mode combination as well as a base mode, and he has to leave room for an additional combination. But I don't think you would ever put the upcoming Haslab Optimus Prime next to this toy in any mode and say they should cost the same price. Motormaster's going to be just as dense, but he is much smaller, and ultimately what he has to do is a lot more simple. Keep in mind, when these guys are in the combined mode, you do get up to the height of Optimus Prime. They are both 12.25 inches tall, essentially. And you do have the density here. But when they charged this, when this became a thing all on its own as a gift set, it was $190. So now if you take a look at that 112 that the Optimus Prime is going to be at the same size as this, it seems a little bit better. It seems a little bit better. Granted, there's 5 toys in here compared to 1. I'm just talking complexity and density for the price, which is what you're getting out of the Optimus and the Magnus. That is something to keep in mind, is that we have turnarounds of these toys, and they're not hollowed. Like, outside of a little bit of hollowing on Optimus Prime's, like, individual robot fist, like his smaller robot form, that's literally it. Everything else seems dead solid. Like, you can look at the back of Magnus and Optimus in Hasbro's videos. There's no hollow parts on the inside. The back of the thighs and biceps aren't hollowed out. They're solid toys all the way around. And no matter what you claim, you know if they did these as retail releases, that wouldn't be true. You know the plastic would be gutted. You know they would do them as hollow parts. You know it, because that's what they always do at retail. I have had some people say they are too big. And I've never heard anyone complain that a toy is, well, I take that back. Unicron back there. That toy is a little bit too big. But when it comes to something like this, some like people arguing like, well, they should be smaller. You know, outside of the fact we know that quality-wise and feature-wise, they would be gutted if they were smaller. Here's the thing. They have to be the size that they are. They absolutely have to be. Because of this. If you want these toys to do everything that the originals do, then you actually do have to have them larger so they can accommodate the deluxes in Ultra Magnus. They have stated this. I couldn't find the quote, but Hasbro, again, has made a post stating that it's the length of Ultra Magnus that and the requirement to fit cars inside his vehicle mode that actually dictates how big everything else is going to be. In order to be big enough to actually fit the deluxes inside, as well as all of his, actual toy stuff, he had to be this big. And that means, Optimus Prime has to be a certain size. And if anything, you could argue they should be much bigger. Now, RID isn't the best at holding to scale, but generally Magnus is treated as a gigantic character compared to the rest, so I can kind of understand. Here. So if you wanted a fully featured Ultra Magnus, this was always what was going to happen. It just was. So as long as we are on scale, let's keep in mind, ever since Siege, Hasbro and Takara have had this really big thing about trying to keep characters in a certain scale with each other. They actually do want them to be when you have them stacked around each other on a shelf, they're supposed to look correct. They're supposed to be the right size when you have your collection on display. The previous attempt at a fire truck in Generations didn't really accomplish that. In robot mode, yeah, fine. Maybe a little bit too small, actually. I don't think you're going to sell a leader class Inferno to make him big enough to hold Red Alert in his arms, though. So, yeah. Fire trucks shouldn't be this small. And in fact, fire trucks, if you don't know, are kind of huge vehicles. They're kind of gigantic. So I can absolutely see where they would want to make him that big. Also, you can find the size comparisons in the show. Like, it's, again, the scale is a little bit weird. But they generally do make sure that Super Optimus Prime in that show and then Omega Prime are generally gigantic characters. They do have a huge amount of bulk to them. So I do think this size is partially because of the functionality of Ultra Magnus as well as the scale that they were in the show. So I don't find the size to be an issue here, especially when you compare it to what you get out of a typical Commander class toy at $90. Yeah, I can absolutely see where, like, at $112, they are about the right size. They just are. By the way, I've also seen people make the argument they should be a Titan class and just two-packed in there. Again, retail is very different beast. They would still be gutted. They still would have features missing. More importantly, this isn't going to be because these are dead solid complex toys. They are going to be too small to get away with doing a Commander. I will remind you that when we've done combiners at Titan class, they have had to be very simplified, and they have generally not been well received in the fandom. There's people who have a lot of issue with Combiner War Devastator. There's a lot of people who have issue with Power of the Prime Predaking. And I understand that. I really do. Omega Prime is going to be way smaller than them because the toy is a lot more dense, because the toys have a lot more features they have to cover. It's just generally not something that's going to work as a Titan, especially because Hasbro, as well as the retailers and factories, they kind of want all those to kind of stay the same size. You know, if you put out a Titan class and the box is 50% smaller, not only does it not look like it's worth $200 on the shelf, it means that the stores that dedicate space specifically to those sizes now have to rearrange their entire toy display to not have gaps. It's very frustrating for a retailer. So there's a lot of reasons why it wouldn't be done as a Titan. Okay, so let's get that idea out of our heads right now. Now, there is also argument of, well, it just doesn't look improved enough from the original, and that's fair. From what Hasbro has stated, there is a focus on making it much more solid and stable in its combined modes. You can see that there is a lot that has changed. You know, it is very much looking like, you know, it does kind of feel like looking at, you know, one Masterpiece Optimus compared to the next Masterpiece Optimus, where they're doing the same thing, but they're trying to do it in a different way that is hopefully better and more interesting than the previous. So I can actually understand where, okay, maybe it's not improved enough for you. And again, good for you. That's fine. If you got the Encore release, that's perfectly cool. Congratulations. Keep a hold of it. If you don't feel like the new one is improved enough from the original, by all means, keep the original. That's fine. Don't rain on people's parades who want the new one, though. I do see a lot of things that have been changed. I do see improvements. I did have people, I did point out, you know, the midsection is where his thighs were in the original toy, and going, now I can't tell where his thighs are. And people go, well, look, they're in the ankles. Look at the ankles on the old Omega Prime. Those are his knees. Those are his knee hinges. Those are not his thighs. So now where are they? Where are your thighs now? They might be in the back. Now that I look at them, they might be in the back. I might have just made an argument for no reason. I don't care. I don't care. So there is a lot different. Now you could make an argument that yes, it's time for the it is time to replace the originals, because the toys were designed in the year 2000, right? Now they do age very well because they are very good toys, but at the same time, those toys are now 24 years old. So, let's take a look. They did do these again as Encore. The photo you're looking at right now is the Encore release. They charged $280 for the Encore. So the old toys, when last released, were smaller, less articulated, a little bit more rickety in the engineering, and they aren't as cleaned up as the new ones are as far as engineering and combination wise, and yet they were more expensive. $250, you're getting a third figure, you're getting improved articulation and stability, you're getting a Magnus that looks way more solid and better proportioned, and yet there are people who still proclaim that, it's not worth the money, even though the original toy, which by all means is going to be inferior, had no problem selling out at $280. Oh, and keep in mind, this toy was riddled with problems. Here's a report from someone who got a hold of theirs. Prime's cab doesn't fit together perfectly. The arm panels are actually to blame for this. They're slightly warped and don't sit flush with the top of the truck. One missile really likes to fire off even if you don't touch it. The panels that cover the holes of the combined mode head leaves behind, doesn't sit flush in either combined or vehicle mode. Magnus's hands don't peg into Primes without sanding them. Plastic quality in Prime's vehicle back end feels off. You try to move the ladder, it bends the connection points between pieces. Prime's legs leaves a small gap in the cab when in vehicle mode. The pieces that are screwed together to make Prime's base shoulders don't line up with each other. Some of the plastic parts on Ultra Magnus split across the seams where they'd normally be glued to hold together. And this is on top of the fact that they also had the wrong sound boxes installed. And these still, with all their flaws, and these were known as soon as people got them in hand, the toys still sold out for $280, and people were fine with that. People complained about it back then too, but it was mostly people just being loud about how prices were, how expensive they were the last time they were released compared to how they were this time, which is to say, people who have no idea how the, basically inflation works, which it sucks, but it's not something we can avoid. It's just plain going to be more expensive to run the old stuff. It just is. So, yeah, I don't understand. I don't understand why everyone was okay. I don't understand why the toy sold well at 280. And then when they offer an improved one that's larger, more modernized at 250, now people have a problem. I did see people who also said, well, I'm just better off to just go get the modern. I'm just better off to go get the vintage one, right? Good luck with that. I can't find any on eBay that aren't around $300, and most of them are flawed. This one does come with the boxes, but of course, for $300, they are used. It's actually $327 after shipping. That they are used, and the chrome on Magnus's bumper is heavily damaged. If you want them brand new in box, you're looking at around $400. So vintage is not going to be an option for you if you're looking for a brand new fresh one. Also keep in mind, some of these toys from back then were notorious for yellowing. Magnus in particular is notorious for yellowing. So you're good luck finding a pristine white Magnus as well. There's a lot of reasons. Whether you're going for the vintage, which are expensive, or the Encore, which is flawed and also like $300 now, again, it's not a better option. It's just not. I'm sorry, it's not. I feel like a lot of this discourse is the same that went around when Overlord, when Deathsaurus became a thing. And Deathsaurus, I know a lot of people who actually turned it down. And then once they got it, once they started seeing it in hand and seeing why it cost what it did, they go, oh, that's why it's that expensive. Because Deathsaurus was done about as good as a modern Transformer can be. It's completely solid. It's not been gutted or hollowed out. It's got a ton of accessories and features. Yes, it's just one big Transformer, but it does have a lot going for it that at retail would be gutted. Remember, Hasbro's alternative was to do this as a Grimlock retool, which would have meant it would have meant the breast force gimmick would have been undone. It would have meant none of the accessories, no throne, nothing like that. It would have meant a lot of the transformation would have been compromised. It would have meant that he just wouldn't have looked right. You know, and even to do this as a commander class, again, smaller, gutted, far less accessories, you'd be getting an incomplete package. If this is the one time you're going to get a new Deathsaurus toy, you might as well go all out and make sure it's as good as it can be. That's why it ended up as Haslab, and I feel like Omega Prime's the same way. This might be the one opportunity they get with toy prices rising, Hasbro being in some financial trouble. This might be the only shot you get at getting something like this. And honestly, be happy. Be happy that this is doing so well, because this opens up the door to things that aren't just relying on Generation 1 nostalgia to sell. If Omega Prime makes all of its stretch goals and is a successful Haslab, that does open up the doors to a lot of stuff that otherwise can't be done at retail. I and a few of my friends want a new Beast Wars Magna Boss. Do you know what's not going to happen? A Beast Wars Magna Boss. It's a little bit too deep of a cut for retail. You can make the argument for Magmatron, but the argument for Magnaboss is it is a lot more complex. It does have to be larger than a commander would generally allow because of its combining, and it's generally a huge character in the show, but it's also not nearly big enough for a Titan. That is the type of character that would only work as a Haslab, but something like this has to work first. Something that is not relying on Generation 1 nostalgia, and something that is doing a lot more combining nonsense. So this, if this works out, could mean a lot of really good stuff for Haslabs in the future. There's a lot of reasons why we want this to succeed, even if you are not a fan of it or think that it's redundant or don't like it, like whatever. This still needs to succeed so that we can open the doors to other things in the future. And besides, if you want to prove that RID characters have any legs to them, this is the way to do it. If this succeeds, let's look at a brand new Skybite toy. Let's look at finishing the Autobot Brothers. Let's look at doing modern Spy Changers. Let's look at a Scourge that is better scaled with all of these new toys and is actually painted correctly. Let's start looking at, stop arguing that this should be a commander class, which, by the way, Ultra Magnus would die a death at commander class, and we know that. Let's start thinking Commander Class Gigatron and Devil Gigatron later on. That's where the Commander Class for this lies. So, This is just me going off and trying to respond to a little bit of the nonsense that's going on about whether or not this toy deserves to exist, if it's right price, if it's done the right, if it's being released the way it should be. I think it is. I think if you break it down and really look at everything you get out of this, I think the price is fine. And again, if you don't like it, don't buy it. As simple as that. So, there you go. There are my arguments. I need to get a nap. And I need to prepare for a 2-hour recording session tonight. So, as always, thank you everyone for watching. I will see you next time.